What if I told you that one of Ford's most legendary engines was so powerful, so dangerously effective, that its rivals worked behind the scenes to silence it? An engine that came out of nowhere, crushed the competition, and then, almost as quickly as it appeared, was buried under layers of politics, rule changes, and corporate sabotage. That engine was the Ford 428 Cobra Jet. To most casual fans, the Cobra Jet sounds like just another old muscle car engine. But for those who were there, for those who saw it roar down drag strips in the late 1960s, it was a weapon. It wasn't just an engine. It was Ford's declaration of war. The year was 1968. Ford was losing ground. Chrysler had its 426 HEMI. Chevrolet had its big blocks. And Ford? Ford was desperate for a knockout punch. The engineers knew the 390 wasn't enough. The 427 was already controversial and under fire. They needed something new, something that could strike fear into the competition while still sneaking past the rules. So they built the Cobra Jet. On paper, it was rated at just 335 horsepower. Sounds respectable, but nothing earth-shattering. Except it was a lie. The Cobra Jet was drastically underrated. In reality, this monster was pushing 410 to 425 horsepower, with a torque curve so brutal that it could smoke tires in every gear. Ford had deliberately downplayed the numbers, disguising the beast they had created. And when the Cobra Jet finally hit the track, the results were immediate and devastating. At the 1968 NHRA Winternationals, Cobra Jet Mustangs lined up against the best drag cars America had to offer. Nobody gave them a chance. But by the end of the day, the Cobra Jet had embarrassed the field, winning races and proving that Ford had just unleashed something terrifying. The crowd was stunned, rivals were furious, and NASCAR and NHRA officials, they were suddenly faced with an uncomfortable question. What do you do when one engine is simply too good? This is where the mystery begins. If the Cobra Jet was so dominant, why don't we hear about it the same way we do about the HEMI or the Chevy 454? Why was Ford's secret weapon pushed into the shadows of racing history? The answer, as you'll see, isn't about engineering. It isn't even about racing. It's about politics, sabotage, and fear. Because the shocking truth is this: the Ford 428 Cobra Jet wasn't defeated on the drag strip. It was defeated in the boardroom. 1968 wasn't just another year in muscle car history. It was the year Ford unleashed its secret weapon, the 428 Cobra Jet. This wasn't just another V8. It was a carefully engineered statement of war, a muscle-bound reply to the Hemi and the big block Chevrolets that had been humiliating Ford on the strip and on the street. On paper, Ford sold the Cobra Jet as a mild 335 horsepower engine. The truth was that this monster could pump out closer to 425 horsepower and nearly 450 pound-feet of torque right off the showroom floor. The Cobra Jet's public debut at the 1968 NHRA Winternationals is still the stuff of legend. Ford sent a fleet of lightweight Mustang fastbacks equipped with the new engine to Pomona, California. The competition laughed. Nobody believed these untested Fords stood a chance against the mighty Hemis and fuel-injected Chevrolets. But by the end of the weekend, the laughter was gone. The Cobra Jet Mustangs stormed through the ranks, stunning the crowd and leaving rivals shell-shocked. The press called it an ambush, the fans called it a miracle, and Ford called it the beginning of a new era. But behind the cheers, the panic began. NASCAR and NHRA officials had seen this story before. Just a few years earlier, Ford's 427 had rattled the foundations of racing until rule changes buried it. Now the Cobra Jet was threatening to do the same thing. Its combination of brute force and surprising reliability made it a nightmare for regulators and competitors alike. Suddenly, drag strips that once showcased variety looked one-sided. For the engineers who had poured their hearts into building the Cobra Jet, it was bittersweet. On the track, they had created an unstoppable weapon. Off the track, they could already feel the walls closing in. The rise of the Cobra Jet wasn't just about horsepower, it was about fear. The fear it put into rivals, and the fear that regulators would soon do what no racer could. Stop it. The hammer didn't just fall, it was dropped with precision. As soon as the 428 Cobra Jet began tearing through drag strips and muscle car showdowns, whispers turned into formal complaints. Rivals knew that if Ford's monster stayed unchecked, it could rewrite the history books. And that's when the rule books suddenly started to change. At first, it looked like small adjustments. Minor tweaks in weight classifications, carburetor limits, and vehicle classes. But those minor changes were carefully designed to cripple the Cobra Jet's advantage. What was once a fair fight on the strip was now a bureaucratic chess game. Ford's engineers could build horsepower, but they couldn't outmuscle the politics that were stacking up against them. For drivers who had felt the Cobra Jet's raw power, the betrayal stung. One Mustang driver later said, "It wasn't the track that beat us, it was the paperwork." Imagine going from invincible to irrelevant, not because your engine failed, but because the officials rewrote the rules overnight. Fans came to the tracks expecting to see the Cobra Jet clash with the best of Chrysler and Chevrolet. But instead, they witnessed watered-down races where Ford's beast was boxed out. The official reason NASCAR and NHRA gave was simple: balance. They claimed the Cobra Jet created an unfair advantage, but behind closed doors, everyone knew what balance really meant: corporate fear. Chevrolet, terrified of losing its grip on both the strip and the street, went into full-blown lobbying mode. Executives and PR teams painted the Cobra Jet as underrated and misleading. They accused Ford of lying about horsepower numbers, insisting that a 335 horsepower label on a 425 horsepower monster was nothing short of cheating. And they weren't entirely wrong. Ford had intentionally downplayed the numbers to slip past regulators and insurance companies. Inside Ford, the reaction was fury mixed with heartbreak. Engineers who had worked night and day on the Cobra Jet saw their creation strangled by politics. Some whispered that entire documents disappeared from archives, as if someone wanted to erase the Cobra Jet story from official history. Meanwhile, the conspiracy theories began. Enthusiasts whispered about backroom deals between NASCAR officials and rival manufacturers. Stories spread of dinners where executives clinked glasses while plotting to clip Ford's wings. Some even claim Chevrolet used the media to exaggerate the Cobra Jet's dominance, branding it unsafe or dangerously overpowered to stir fear among fans and regulators. The tactic was clever. If you can't beat Ford on the track, beat them in the headlines. And the fans? They felt cheated. Muscle car culture was supposed to be about raw innovation. May the best machine win. But now it was clear. Politics decided winners as much as performance did. The promised showdown, Ford's Cobra Jet versus Chrysler's HEMI versus Chevrolet's Rat motor, was stolen before it could fully play out. For many, it marked the moment when racing stopped being pure and started being political theater.